The release of Paladin Strait has brought a lot more questions than answers than we initially expected this era, with its extremely cryptic ending inviting that familiar voice to speak to Clancy.
Don't feel so proud, so emotional. Hello, Clancy.
So, what exactly is going on? And how does this tell us how the story may end? This section is going to be very brief, as the purpose is to just catch everyone up to a baseline understanding of the clues we'll be looking at across this video. Firstly, Paladin Strait is the final track on Clancy, named after the fictional stretch of sea that connects Voldsoy and Trench to Dema. As the final track of the album, it was also expected to wrap up the story, something Tyler has confirmed this album will do time and time again in interviews. So, Paladin Strait tells us the ending. Secondly, the lyrics spoken at the very end by Tyler and the low voice are incredibly important as they aren't recorded in the lyric book. This seems to solely be a music video or lore addition to the song. Finally, that low voice at the end contains what is known as a leitmotif, a musical tune or cue that is used to illustrate the presence of a certain character. The pilots are notorious for using this method when wanting to illustrate the presence of Blurryface, the bishops, as seen with the low voice in Stressed Out and many other songs such as No Chances or Fairly Local. So, to summarise, Paladin Strait is the ending. The lyrics at the end are technically not part of the track, meaning they exclusively hold lore significance, and a bishop exclusively speaks to us at the end of the song. Paladin Strait is a really odd song lyrically. Out of all of the lore-explicit songs we have had, which either focus on world building or detail events happening in the past tense, it almost seems spoken in a mixture of the present and future tense, as if the events spoken in Paladin Strait are about to transpire. For example, Tyler states he would swim the Paladin Strait without any flotation. He isn't explaining what he's currently doing, but almost fantasizing about what he would do in the future. Meanwhile, the verses focus on what is happening in the present tense, which chronologically is all over the place. First, he's about to enter the breach of waves to cross the strait to go towards someone, and this someone isn't even clear itself. As per navigating, he's already with the banditos, and it would be odd for a bishop to be sitting there giggling and twirling their non-existent hair, betting on him making it across. Then, he's surrounded, unsure of if he'll make it, which almost has an implication that he's either in Dema and surrounded, or still within the ocean of Paladin Strait, and unsure if he'll make it to the other side. And then, all of a sudden, he's climbing a tower whilst the banditos are fighting. It's very rushed and nonsensical. And the irregularities do not just stop there. The title being Paladin Strait threw me off heavily when I first saw the tracklist because, as far as we're concerned, by the end of Overcompensate, Tyler and Josh had already crossed the Paladin Strait as they travel from Voldsoy back to Trench. There is no reason for them to go back across the Paladin Strait again since Trench and Dema are on the same land, not separated by sea. The way this is written lyrically very much reminds me of a Clancy letter, the idea that he's documenting his experiences whilst going through them, and the idea of these lyrics being a written account of his experiences suddenly start to make a lot more sense when you consider the line of the bishop at the end of the song. Clancy is in the middle of speaking, documenting how he is confronting a bishop, and then all of a sudden a door opens and Clancy is interrupted. It's a minor detail, but it seems incredibly odd that Clancy is the one being interrupted, losing dominance in writing the narrative to a bishop that is greeting him. Combined with the use of the present and future tense, the nonsensical and hasty progression of events, and a bishop opening a door to interrupt Clancy, this ending heavily seems like Clancy is writing out the end of the Dema story, being interrupted by a bishop whilst he is writing the end, being caught in the act almost. This is going to seem a little nonsensical, but the story of Dema seems to be a story within a story. This is a story about Clancy trying to cope with the harsh conditions in Dema by writing a story about a version of himself that goes on this adventure, joins a rebellion. Clancy is the author of this story. Clancy is the one who created this world. Firstly, the opening of the door instantly reminded me of the blue door we saw in the Psy era, a seemingly random and odd addition to the lore that was just explained as the place Clancy was held whilst writing Psy. You cannot tell me that such a detail that was even used in concerts isn't an overall important detail in the lore and is just a holding cell for Clancy. Moreover, to take this a step further, the purpose of the cell with the blue door was to put Clancy in an isolated space whilst he wrote and created the world of Psy. If the blue door really is going to make a reappearance, it would make sense that a similar concept applies. This is a place where Clancy creates, writes the story of Trench we all know and love. Psy also brings some interesting ideas of fiction into play, with Clancy canonically imagining half of the Psy livestream set, and the slogan for that era being "There is always an escape" pictured beside Tyler's head. Secondly, we have the sampling used in Overcompensate, which is canonically an explicit lore song by the fact that it name drops Clancy in the lyrics. It is Clancy talking to the people of Dema and asserting himself as the new leader of the Banditos. Considering it is Clancy talking in Overcompensate, it makes the addition of that specific verse from Bandito all the more strange, because the purpose of that verse is for our Tyler, the real-life Tyler, to explain that the Trench story is a world he created to feel control over his internal struggles. So, why is the character of Clancy telling us this is a world he created to feel some control? Unless this lyric was said by Clancy all along, and Clancy created the world of Trench that we watched in order to feel some control whilst inside the walls of Dema. We also have the Leave the City tour visuals, where at the end it shows a wall filled with drawings of things both around Trench and in Dema. The drawings of Trench make sense for someone who's escaped and come back, as if trying to remember freedom, but the drawings of the bird cages, trees, and vultures, common things around Dema, and some of these being symbolic, do not make sense. Most of these are seemingly random additions, whilst the drawing of Bandito's symbols would be an incredibly risky move if a bishop were to enter the room and find it. With hindsight, these drawings look like sketches and drafts of locations and symbols for the story Clancy is writing to help cope. There's also the title of the song itself, Paladin Strait. A paladin is a term for a fictional hero class who fights for a noble cause. Clancy has made himself into a fictional hero who is fighting against the tyranny of Dema. There's also another bit of evidence, and that's fairly local. You may have noticed my earlier foreshadowing of not naming the bishop who spoke to Clancy despite it seeming to be Nico, but I don't think that's the case. When the bishop speaks, they say "so few, so proud, so emotional," a lyric from the song Fairly Local. This to me screams that Fairly Local has some lore significance to it. Such is unsurprising when you realise the bishop associated with this song, Andre, not only represents a lyric associated with cycles, but is also a representation of the real-life mathematician Andre Veal, one of the original founders of the Bourbaki group, as well as the creator of the null symbol we saw during the Blurryface era. Fairly Local talks about a lot, but I'd like to first talk about its credibility in being a source of lore. Ever since the release of the Clancy digital remains, we've been getting a lot of hints that Dema will burn down fully through the amount of images released of everything on fire. Such an idea was reaffirmed in the Outside video, where it looked like the start of a fire was beginning, and we also have the limited vinyls being named the Inferno vinyl. Fairly Local confirms this ending to us with lyrics such as "in black like a funeral," implying that there will be a death of something, and the world around us is burning. However, Fairly Local also potentially confirms that the events of the Trench story are merely scenarios Clancy has made up. The world around us is burning illustrates the fire of Dema, which, according to images, Clancy will get caught up in whilst trying to find Nico. However, the full lyric is "the world around us is burning, but we're so cold." This almost seems to imply that Clancy can't feel the fire, despite it being implied that Dema is in the midst of an inferno. He can't feel the fire because the events of the Trench story are fictional. There's also the chorus. "I'm fairly local, I've been around, I've seen the streets you're walking down." This chorus almost seems like someone documenting someone else or their surroundings. Clancy is fairly local, and he's been documenting the streets of Dema, much like what we see in the Leave the City tour visualizer. Let's also backtrack a little bit to Andre Veal, the creator of the redefined null symbol in maths. It also stands for an empty set in mathematics. It quite literally means nothing. And considering said symbol has been used in every lore-related era so far, this has to be something important. Why? Because the story in every era is nothing. It doesn't physically exist. There you have it. That's my theory on what I believe Paladin Strait will show us is the ending of the story. This is a story within a story, about Clancy trying to survive in Dema by creating a story where he's the hero. Thanks for watching. I probably sound insane. This probably isn't gonna come true. This is just like some inconsistencies I noticed, and also I rationally cannot explain that ending any other way. But then the pilots might pull something else out of the bag, because let's be real here, they pulled that whole Josh isn't real thing out of the bag, and that completely blindsided me and caught me by surprise. So I might be right. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm still standing by the heavy, dirty soul returning to the beginning of the cycle thing, so I've been saying that for 5 years. This is just me wavering last minute. This is a mini theory, so despite that, I hope you all enjoyed watching, and thank you for watching Top Debate. Paladin Strait is going to give me insomnia.